Margaret Peggy Thompson had spent a lifetime in dangerous skies, but at 90 years old, the quiet streets of Riverstone felt like the safest landing she'd ever made. That was before the day a gang of leather-clad strangers rolled into the filler-up Freddy's station and made the mistake of thinking she was just a frail old woman. This gives you intrigue, stakes, and a clear contrast between perception and reality, setting up the reader to want to know exactly how they were wrong. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which country you're watching from and make sure to subscribe to the channel because tomorrow's episode is going to be incredibly exciting. The Virginia sun, hazy and golden, came through the lace curtains of the small wooden house on Elm Street. Inside, moving with the slow, careful movements that come with being 90, Margaret Peggy Thompson hummed quietly. The tune was an old one, something from the USO shows that felt like another life. Her hands' knuckles swollen with arthritis but still surprisingly firm, carefully placed a single white carnation in a cut-glass vase. The silver star, polished to a soft shine, sat beside framed photos on the mantelpiece, a young woman in an olive-drab flight suit standing strong beside a damaged Huey helicopter, a handsome man in a Wet'suwee uniform, a family picture faded by time. Outside, Riverstone breathed its slow, small-town life. Built on the banks of the slow Shenandoah River branch that gave it its name, it was a place where everyone knew everyone, or believed they did. Front porches were for waving, the diner for talk over endless coffee, and Friday nights meant high school football under the bright stadium lights. Peggy was part of the view, the nice, slightly bent lady who cared for her roses with army-like care, baked famous apple pies for church sales, and always had a Werther's candy and a kind word for the kids walking home from school. Few, if any, remembered the short, polite article in the Riverstone Gazette years ago about her war service. To them, she was just Miss Peggy. Her schedule was set. Every Tuesday and Friday, rain or shine, she drove her perfectly kept 1987 Buick LeSabre, Betsy, to fill her up Freddy's Gas and Go on the edge of town. It was a habit, 10 gallons of regular gas, a check of the oil, though Freddy always offered, and a nice talk with Freddy himself, a Vietnam-time Navy man who, feeling a similar spirit under the grandmotherly outside, treated her with quiet respect. That Friday started like always. The air was thick with the smell of honeysuckle and coming summer heat. Peggy steered Betsy smoothly into the station, the old engine humming happily. She was carefully placing the heavy nozzle into the tank when the low, mean growl of many motorcycles broke the quiet afternoon. A group of 15 motorcycles, shiny with chrome and painted in scary shades of black and blood red, roared into the station like a winning army. The Shadow Vipers. They got off with practiced confidence, their leather jackets decorated with skulls, snakes, and the club's sign, a snake striking from darkness. Their being there instantly changed the feeling. Freddy's friendly smile disappeared, replaced by careful tension. A young mother filling her minivan quickly finished and drove off, not looking at anyone. The air felt electric with unspoken threat. Their leader, known only as Havoc, was a huge man. His shaved head shone under the bright lights, a thick beard covering most of a face marked with scars. Cold, pale eyes looked over the station with hunting lack of care until they landed on Peggy. A slow, nasty smile spread across his face as he watched her fight a little with the heavy hose. "Looky here, boys," he said slowly, his voice a rough scratch cutting through the engine noise. "Granny needs a hand pump and gas, or maybe just a push into the grave." His friends laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Peggy didn't move. She finished putting in the nozzle, clicked the handle, and turned slowly, her look steady. "I believe I have it under control, young man," she said, her voice calm but carrying the quiet command of someone used to being heard over helicopter noise. No help needed. Havoc took a step closer, entering her space. The smell of leather, old smoke, and cheap beer washed over her. "Young man," he mocked, "shows what you know, old woman. Around here you show respect to me, to my club." He tapped the snake patch on his chest. "This ain't your knitting circle." "I respect those who earn it," Peggy said evenly, meeting his cold stare without looking away. Her body, despite her weakness, was strangely straight. Bullying is a poor replacement. One of the other bikers, a thin man with a rat-like face called Skeeter, laughed. "Hear that, Havoc? Granny thinks you ain't earned nothin'." He walked over and purposely kicked over Peggy's small canvas shopping bag near the pump. A few apples and a carton of eggs fell out, the eggs breaking on the concrete. "Oops, clumsy me." A flash of anger, sharp and cold, lit up Peggy's blue eyes. It wasn't the eggs, it was the needless meanness. She didn't look at the mess, her look fixed on Havoc. "Pick it up," she said, her voice going lower, losing its softness. Havoc laughed. A short, loud sound. "Or what? You gonna call the cops?" Old man Henderson spends more time sleeping at his desk than patrolling. This is our town now, Grandma. You breathe our air, you pay the toll. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. The threat was heavy. Maybe we start taking from you. Nice little house you got there. Be a shame if something happened to it. It was the threat, the harm suggested against her safe place, her last home filled with memories of her dead husband, Robert, and the quiet life they'd made after the noise of war, that went too far. Peggy didn't react with fear. Her chin lifted a tiny bit. The look in her eyes wasn't defiance anymore. It was the cold look of a battlefield leader spotting an enemy target. You've made a big mistake, young man, she said, each word clear, icy. Havoc moved back a little, disturbed by the sudden change. This wasn't the reaction he wanted. Tears, shrinking back, begging. This was dangerous. His hand shot out, grabbing her thin arm hard. Listen here, you worn-out old bite. He never finished the word. Peggy moved with a speed that didn't match her age. It wasn't a fighting move, but the natural reaction of someone who'd flown through skies filled with enemy fire. Her free hand shot up, not to hit, but to sharply poke stiff fingers into the tender spot just above his wrist where he held her. It was a trick learned long ago, meant to break a grip fast. Havoc yelled in surprise and pain, naturally letting go. Peggy stepped back smoothly, putting the Buick's big shape between them. The whole station froze. Freddie's hand was inches from the alarm button under the counter. The other Vipers looked shocked, then mad, hands going for bike chains or knives hidden in boots. Havoc held his wrist, his face showing rage and shame. Being beaten physically, even for a second, by a 90-year-old woman in front of his men was a terrible hit to his power. You dried-up old witch, he spat, his voice shaking with anger. You just signed your death warrant. Nobody touches Havoc. Nobody. We're gonna burn your house down around your ears. We're gonna make you beg before we're done. Peggy stood straight, her breathing calm even with the energy rushing through her. The fear was there, a cold drip down her back, but it was covered by years of training and a burning center of just anger. She looked Havoc right in the eye, her own look as sharp and hard as stone. You think you know terror? She asked, her voice low, cutting through his noise like a knife. You pretend to be tough guys on quiet streets. You have no idea. Without another word, ignoring the shouts and threats starting behind her, Peggy turned her back on the Shadow Vipers. It was the biggest act of defiance. She walked with even, calm steps back to Betsy's open driver's door. The bikers, briefly stunned by her nerve, watched in shock. Havoc, shaking with helpless rage, screamed after her. Run, old woman. Run and hide. We'll find you. Peggy didn't run. She slid into the worn leather seat of the Buick, closed the door with a solid thunk and started the engine. As she smoothly drove away from the pumps, she didn't look back at the angry gang. Her focus was total. She reached into her old leather purse, not for keys, but for a small, ancient flip phone. Her fingers, surprisingly steady now, dialed a number she hadn't called in almost 20 years, a number remembered like her own service number. The phone rang twice before a deep, rough voice answered, made harsh by years of cigarettes and yelling over engines. Morrison. Jack, Peggy said, her voice missing its usual warmth, down to pure order. It's Peggy, Margaret Thompson. A pause of shocked silence. Peggy? Hell's bells, Peg. Is that really you? You sound different. The voice softened for a moment, full of real surprise and warmth. How long's it been? Not long enough for small talk, Colonel, Peggy cut in, her tone allowing no argument. I need the guard, Riverstone, Virginia. Fill her up, Freddie's station, now. The change on the other end was instant. The warmth vanished, replaced by the cold, sharp focus of a soldier getting important news. Understood. Situation. Local gang. Shadow Vipers. 15 strong, maybe more. Leader uses Havoc. Threatened me. Threatened my home. Went too far, Jack. Her voice shook now, not from fear but from controlled fury. They touched me. Threatened fire. Another pause, shorter this time. Peggy could almost hear the thinking. The battle planning happening. Laying hands on you. Morrison's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. That right, Peg? Affirmative, she stated clearly. Tried to hurt me. Clear threats of burning and harm. Town sheriff's useless. Probably bought. Got it, Morrison snapped. The sound of movement, a chair scraping, came through the phone. Done, Major. The guard rides. ETA. She heard him shout an order away from the phone. 4 hours. Hold tight, Peg. We're coming. See that you do, Colonel, Peggy said, a hint of her old dry smile touching her lips for a second. Thompson out. She closed the phone sharply. She drove home, the familiar streets feeling strange. The threat hung heavy. Would they come tonight? Would they be bold enough? She parked Betsy in the garage, locked it and carefully checked every window and door of her small house. She didn't get a weapon. Her old service gun was locked away, a memory of a past she liked kept hidden. Instead, she sat in her favorite armchair by the front window, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside her, her look fixed on the quiet street. She wasn't waiting in fear, she was keeping watch. 4 hours later, the first far-off rumble reached Riverstone. It wasn't the messy noise of the shadow vipers. This was deeper, heavier, a matched thunder that shook your chest. It rolled down the highway, getting louder, rattling windows. At Freddy's station, Havoc and his crew, cheering their earlier bullying with stolen beer, froze mid-laugh. The sound was wrong. It wasn't local cops, and it wasn't enemy bikers. This sounded planned, army-like. Headlights cut the evening dimness, not the scattered lights of choppers, but neat rows. They came over the hill looking down on Riverstone. Not 15 bikes, but 50. Huge Harley-Davidson Electra Glides, Road Kings, and heavily changed touring bikes, all shiny black or olive drab. The riders weren't wearing flashy, scary jackets. They wore leather vests over worn denim or army jackets, marked with a simple, strong patch, an American eagle holding a shield saying Veterans Guard. Their faces were carved with the hard lines of experience: Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. These were not young thugs. These were men who had seen war and carried it in their eyes. At the front of the line, riding a huge black Road King, sat Colonel Jack "Iron Jack" Morrison. Even at 70, he was a powerful figure. Wide-shouldered, standing very straight, his short white hair and steel look showing command. His vest had more pins and marks than the others: Ranger tab, Pathfinder badge, several combat patches. He raised a gloved hand, and the 50 bikes stopped perfectly together outside Freddy's station, the engine settling into a low, threatening hum that drowned out everything else. The silence that followed was thick. The shadow vipers looked like kids playing dress-up suddenly faced by real soldiers. Havoc tried to show his boldness, stepping forward, but his swagger was gone, replaced by nervousness. Morrison got off with the easy movement of a younger man. He didn't look at Havoc. His eyes checked the station, stopping on the still wet smear of egg yolk on the concrete near Pump 3. His look finally landed on Freddy, who stood pale-faced behind the counter. "You Freddy?" Morrison's voice cut through the quiet like a snap. "Yes, sir," Freddy stuttered, quickly, naturally saluting before stopping himself. "Margaret Thompson. She here?" "No, sir. She left hours ago." After, Freddy stopped, looking nervously at Havoc. Morrison's icy blue eyes finally fixed on Havoc. He took 2 careful steps forward, stopping just out of reach. The sheer presence of the man, the calm, deadly command coming from him, made Havoc step back without meaning to. "You Havoc?" Morrison asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yeah, who the hell are you?" Havoc tried to sound tough, but it came out scratchy. "Colonel Jack Morrison, United States Army, retired." He didn't speak louder. "You laid hands on Major Margaret Thompson. You threatened her home." It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact, said like a final judgment. Havoc stuck out his chest. "So what? She disrespected me." Morrison moved. It was lightning fast. One moment he was standing still. The next, his gloved hand shot out, not to hit but to grab like a steel trap around Havoc's throat just under the jaw. It wasn't meant to choke, but to control, to shame, to show total power. Havoc choked, his eyes popping, his hands pulling uselessly at Morrison's unmoving arm. The other Vipers rushed forward, but stopped as 50 Veterans Guard members got off together, a wall of serious-faced veterans forming a silent, unbreakable line. The message was clear: move, and it gets bad. Morrison leaned in close, his face inches from Havoc's scared one. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper, heard only by Havoc and the nearest Vipers. "Listen close, you weak little bully. Margaret Thompson flew through gunfire to pull men, better men than you could ever be, out of hell. She faced death with more guts in her little finger than you have in your whole rotten crew." He squeezed a little, making Havoc cry out. "You threatened her. You touched her." Morrison's voice was icy. "That was your last mistake. You and your trash friends have 2 choices. You crawl back into whatever hole you came from, and you stay there. Or," Morrison's eyes looked over the frozen Vipers, "you stay, and we take you apart. Peace. Bye. Peace. We know how. We've done it before. Clear?" He let go of Havoc, who fell back, gasping for air, holding his throat, his face showing terror and shame. Morrison didn't even look at him. He turned to his second-in-command, a tough man with a fake leg and a master sergeant's mark on his vest. "Gunny, set up a line around the area. Set up a command post. We're staying until this town is safe." He looked back towards the town, his look finding the known roofline of Peggy's house on Elm Street. "The Major needs help." News moved through Riverstone fast. The arrival of the Veterans Guard, the public shaming of havoc. It was the most exciting, frightening thing to happen in years. Curtains moved. Neighbors whispered on porches. Sheriff Bud Henderson came, sirens screaming, only to find his power suddenly small next to Morrison's quiet command and the unspoken threat of 50 well-armed veterans who clearly didn't accept his authority. Morrison showed him Freddie's security video, the kick, the grab, the threats. Henderson, sweating and avoiding Morrison's look, mumbled about checking into it before quickly going back to his office. Peggy watched the first group of Veterans Guard drive down Elm Street and take quiet spots near her house. A wave of deep relief, mixed with strong pride, washed over her. They had come, her war friends. When Morrison himself knocked on her door an hour later, she opened it, her calm back, a small smile on her lips. "Took you long enough, Colonel," she said, her voice regaining its usual warmth, though sharp at the edges. Morrison's serious face broke into a rare, real smile. He stepped inside, taking off his cap. "Traffic, Major. Lots of it between here and Kentucky." He looked around the comfortable living room, his look staying on the photos, the Silver Star. "Good to see you, Peg. Really good." The formal talk faded. He was Jack again, she was Peg. Over tea, strong, black, the way they both liked it, Peggy told him everything. Not just what happened, but the sneaky way the Shadow Vipers held Riverstone. The protection payments forcing small businesses like Millie's Diner and Sam's Hardware. The strange fires that had burned places whose owners wouldn't pay. The constant fear that kept people quiet. The whispers that Sheriff Henderson ignored it, maybe even got a share. "It's not just about me, Jack," Peggy said, her eyes sharp. "They've poisoned this town. They hunt the weak, the alone. They think they own it." Morrison listened closely, nodding. Classic bully ways. Use fear, ruin authority. We've seen it before. In Baghdad. In Saigon. He set his cup down. "We can scare them, Peg. We can force them out tomorrow. But they'll just start up somewhere else, or sneak back when we leave. Or worse, they might hurt the townspeople out of anger." Peggy understood. "So we don't just frighten them off. We break them apart. We show them for what they are. We give the town its strength back." "Exactly," Morrison said. "This needs to be Riverstone's fight. We're just the spark. The Guard provides the cover. The town needs to find its weapon." The Veterans Guard didn't just stand guard. Morrison placed his men with careful skill. Patrols rode through town day and night, a visible, scary presence. They set up a command post in Freddie's back office, making communication lines. But importantly, they also started talking. Not threats, but talks. Gunnery Sergeant Gunna Henderson, no link to the sheriff, a huge man missing part of his left ear, sat at Millie's diner counter. He didn't order. He asked Millie, her hands shaking as she poured coffee, about the troubles she had. Slowly, stopping often, she talked about the weekly insurance payments that were draining her. Master Sergeant Doc Chen, a former war doctor, visited old Mr. Peterson, whose drugstore had strangely burned after he refused to sell cold medicine to Viper friends. Doc listened, took notes, offered quiet support. Morrison himself called a meeting at the town hall. He didn't invite the sheriff. He invited the town. Shop owners, teachers, farmers, parents. The hall was full, humming with nervous energy. He stood before them, not in uniform, but in his vest, the eagle and shield patch clear. He didn't yell. He spoke simply, strongly. He told them who Peggy Thompson really was. Major Thompson, Silver Star winner, pilot who faced enemy guns to save many lives. He told about the gas station event, the threats against her home. He explained the Shadow Viper's ways, forcing payments, burning, scaring. "These aren't tough guys," Morrison said, his voice echoing in the quiet hall. "They're cowards, bullies. They count on your fear. They count on silence." He pointed towards Peggy, sitting quietly in the front row. Major Thompson refused to be silent. She refused to be afraid. She stood firm. "Now the Veterans Guard stands with her, but we can't stay always. This is your town. These are your homes, your businesses, your children." He paused, letting it sink in. "The Guard will protect you while you find your voice. We will help you collect proof. We will stand between you and the Vipers. But you need to stand up. You need to talk to each other. You need to talk to real law enforcement, state police, the FBI. You need to tell your stories. Together you are stronger than any gang." A wave went through the crowd. People looked at each other. Millie stood up, her voice shaking but clear. "He's right. They've been sucking me dry for years." Sam Henderson from the hardware store followed. Then Mr. Peterson, tears in his eyes, talked about his drugstore. One by one, the wall of fear broke. People shared stories, named names, said what they thought about Sheriff Henderson doing nothing. Peggy stood then. She didn't need a microphone. Her quiet voice got full attention. "Riverstone," she said, looking around at her neighbors, her friends. "I came here for peace. I found a good life, good people. These thugs want to steal that. They want us to live in fear. Colonel Morrison is right. They are cowards. But courage isn't having no fear. It's acting even with fear. We have a chance now. Let's take back our town, together." A cheer started, unsure at first, then growing into a loud roar. It was the sound of a town waking up. The Shadow Vipers didn't disappear quickly. Havoc, shamed and angry, tried to get back at them. A brick flew through Millie's diner window late one night. It broke against strong safety glass put in by Veterans Guard workers the day before. An attempt to burn Sam's hardware store was stopped by a guard patrol. 2 Vipers were caught right there and given to newly arrived, doubtful state police, with carefully recorded proof. The guard worked with scary skill. They gave safety escorts for townspeople feeling threatened. They set up secret tip lines. They used their army contacts to quietly collect background information on the Vipers, finding old arrest papers, drug-selling links, and ties to bigger crime groups. This information was quietly sent to the FBI office. The town, feeling braver, began to fight back in smaller ways. People stopped looking away when Vipers rode by. They stopped paying the protection money. They started reporting every strange thing. The Riverstone Gazette, before too scared, printed a front-page story detailing the Vipers' payment scheme and the sheriff's doubtful inaction, naming many secret town sources fed information by Doc Chen. Pressure grew on Sheriff Henderson. State police started asking hard questions. Havoc got more and more desperate and alone. His tries to scare were met with the unmoving wall of the Veterans Guard, and a town that was no longer afraid to watch, to point, to call the real police. His own crew started splitting. Skeeter was caught on an old arrest paper in the next county. Younger members, seeing things were bad and disturbed by the calm, deadly skill of the Guard, started leaving. The end came not with a big fight, but with a quiet win. A planned raid by state police and FBI, acting on papers made from the pile of proof gathered by the town and helped by the Guard, hit known Viper spots. Drugs, guns, stolen goods, and careful money records showing the payment ring were taken. Havoc was found hiding in a crawlspace behind a fake wall in a broken trailer, trying to burn record books. He was pulled out shouting and spitting, not by tough bikers but by serious-faced state police. Sheriff Henderson was sent home while they checked for bad actions and not doing his job. The Veterans Guard didn't leave right away. They stayed for weeks, helping the town change. They helped start a neighborhood watch group taught by Gunny. They helped fix Millie's window right. They stood as quiet guards during the tense town meeting where a temporary sheriff was picked, a retired state police officer who lived just outside town and was known for being honest. One cool fall morning, a month after the raids, the Guard got ready to leave. The town met on Main Street. There were speeches, tears, handshakes, and many homemade pies. Millie gave Morrison a key to the city, a sign made by Sam Henderson in his hardware store. Children waved small American flags. Morrison stood before the crowd, Peggy beside him. "Riverstone," he said, his voice thick with feeling he rarely showed. "You did this. You found your courage. You stood together." The Guard was just a nudge about what ordinary people can do when they refuse to be bullied. "Keep the peace you've won. Watch out for each other." And he turned to Peggy, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Watch out for this amazing lady. She's your true protector." Peggy stepped forward. She looked small among the crowd and the tall veterans, but her presence filled the street. "Thank you, Jack. Thank you, all of you," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You reminded us who we are. You reminded me who I am. Not just a pilot, not just a grandmother, but someone who believes in the strength of community, in the power of goodness. This town has its heart back. Keep it beating strong." As the deep sound of 50 Harley engines started, the Guard lined up. Morrison got on his bike, gave Peggy a last sharp salute. She returned it, her body perfect, the old fire bright in her eyes. They rode out of Riverstone, not as winners but as brothers going home, leaving behind a town changed not by their force but by the courage they had sparked. A year later, Riverstone enjoyed the warm glow of a peaceful summer. The change was deep. New businesses had opened where closed windows once told a story of fear. Millie's diner was busy, her Guard special pancake breakfast a local favorite. Sam's hardware grew bigger, offering classes on home safety. A community garden, Peggy's idea, grew well on an empty lot where a Viper-linked bar once stood. Most amazingly, several former Shadow Vipers were still in town, not as threats but as new members of the community. Skeeter, after serving his time, worked at Freddy's garage under Freddy's firm but fair watch. Another young man, Ripper, who had joined the Vipers out of boredom and no purpose, found help from Doc Chen, helping at the new Veterans Outreach Center, Peggy's other idea. The center gave support, advice, and job training for local veterans and kids at risk. Ripper, it seemed, had a talent for fixing things. Peggy sat on her porch swing watching fireflies dance in the evening light. The silver star shone on her lapel, not as a weapon, but as a quiet sign. She wasn't just the nice old lady on Elm Street anymore. She was Major Thompson, the quiet starter, the town's chosen family leader. Her story wasn't written in the noise of helicopter blades or the thunder of motorcycles, but in the new spirit of Riverstone. It was carved in the courage of ordinary people who stood up, in the second chances given and taken, in the understanding that true strength wasn't about control but about toughness, loyalty, and the quiet, steady belief in the goodness of others. She sipped her lemonade, a happy smile on her face.